Yo, Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it, and shalom. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show's Liberty and Friends. That's right, Liberty and Friends, that comes to you every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. This is and will be, hopefully, your definitive show that closes off the news week. Guys, welcome to it. Sorry for the slight delay. We're going to have a bumper show, a bumper show. With that being said, please, whether you are watching me from YouTube or on the Facebook stream, please smash that like button and please share this link. And let's bring as many people as possible onto the show. Let's make the show as popular as your Sunday evening carte blanche viewing, for example. So welcome to it, guys. Welcome to it. I'm going to give it just 2 minutes, just to allow people to hop on to the stream. I do see the comments trickling in. I've taken a bit more time to get used to my broadcasting software, this new software that I am using at the moment. I see you, Mr. Taylor. Welcome, Paula Kernan. Stephen Sickle on the YouTube side of things. John Combrink and Skulk Stapleberg, Desmond van Breda, Ronald, and Cornelius. I see you guys trickling in on the YouTube side. Remember, please, if you can, support the channel. You can do that by just checking out the descriptor of the video. Your contributions go a long way, especially as I begin. I keep saying begin, but we're quite advanced now in the work of effectively professionalizing this channel to a large extent. I've got some people who are working in the background as we build a website. We work on merchandise and, you know, the A to Z of what will be the Big Daddy Liberty Show, and really more importantly, the campaigns that rope every single one of you who are fans of the show into pushing back against the politicians. So 2021 will be that kind of year where there are actual hard campaigns where people like you and me can actually hit the ground and spread the ideas of a property-owning, free, non-racial, and growing society, if you will. And of course, the values that I often talk about of faith, flag, family, and freedom. So look forward to that. There'll be lots of campaigns in that regard, and we'll launch quite big in that regard. So shout out to everybody of you, every single one of you, who contribute to the show. You can do that by as little as $20 a month, guys. It is literally as $20 a month, and it goes a long way to funding the work that we do here. With that being said, let me not waffle on. I have a jam-packed and super awesome panel of guests tonight. Let me actually just bring them onto the stream as we look at the news week that was. All right, give me a moment, guys. I'm just going to bring them on here. It'll take a bit of a second. And yeah, I think that's everybody. Guys, good evening. I'll begin with Russell Lamberti. Russell, hi. How are you doing, brother?
Sihle, well, man, it's really good to be with you guys. Good to be on the show.
Awesome, brother. And then I have Chris Hattingh just next to him. Chris, brother, how are you doing?
Sihle, good evening. A pleasure to be here with you and such esteemed company.
Awesome. I just forgot to mention that Chris Hattingh, of course, is from the Free Market Foundation. He is an extensive writer and someone who you can catch on social media too. I'll let them at the end of the show present, how they can, how you can reach them on their social media. Russell Lamberti, of course, a very familiar face in the South African intellectual space, and I say that with the necessary reverence. This is someone I learn a lot from. He's from ETM Macro Advisors, of course. I'll let Russell give you guys his details at the end of the show. And of course, I have Sara gone. Sara, good evening.
Evening, Sihle. Hi, guys.
Fantastic. Very good to have you. Sara gone, of course, is from the Daily Friend. That's a publication, a news publication, which I strongly encourage you to subscribe to and get all your news, analysis, and opinion from there. That's www.dailyfriend.co.za. Sara, welcome to you. And then last but definitely not least is Tami Jackson, student activist and really the founder of one of South Africa's more prominent and vocal liberal student movements in the country. I'm talking, of course, about Progress SA. Tami, good evening to you.
Hi, Sihle. Thanks for having me, and good evening to all your viewers and the other guests on the panel.
All right, there we go, guys. We're going to get straight into it. And guys, this has been a rather interesting news week for the wrong reasons. And the reasons that you'll never hear really in mainstream media, because the analysis often is so damn shallow. So let me begin where I think what dominated the headlines this week: the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, delivering the State of the Nation address for this year. One which it's questionable whether it was inspiring and rallied the nation behind a solid sense of what we need to do as a country. Sara, I'm going to begin with you, and then I'll come to the rest of you chaps. Your thoughts on the speech? Was this the kind of speech that signaled a change in the right direction?
It not only didn't signal a change in the right direction, it didn't signal a change at all. In fact, it was almost rather sad, because it had exactly the layout of all his previous speeches. It had metaphors, it had long explanations of things. It said certain things were happening and being launched, and programs were being put in place, and plans, and lots of plans. But I actually think it was almost like the moment when those who still supported Cyril and thought he was going to be a good president for us decided he wasn't.
Absolutely.
It was like universal dismay. Actually, some
Tami,
sorry. Just to say, some wag on Twitter said he should have just sent a voice note.
It would have been sufficient, wouldn't it? Tami, I must come to you very briefly, because you look at this from someone who is within the political realm broadly, and someone who's still a student. Your thoughts on the speech? Did you take something out of this which maybe made you as a South African feel like you are part of the speech? Was the speech for you, or was it, as I suggest, for the political elites?
Look, Sihle, I've been involved in youth activism, student activism for 4 years now. And I feel like there's nothing that can really surprise me anymore. I think politics has kind of like changed me into a bit of a cynical person. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to all of you. The truth of the matter is I didn't watch the State of the Nation address for the first time. All I can tell you is I was in the Cape Town CBD, and my car was abruptly stopped by a traffic officer while Cyril's envoy of like 20 cars were just like passing by. So I thought that was really funny, and I was watching it while I was sitting in a bar with my friends on Thursday. But I wasn't really listening. So the truth is, Sihle, I've become very cynical about the State of the Nation address generally. I think if there's anything I'm glad the pandemic robbed us of, I would probably say it's all the pomp and ceremony that comes with SONA. I think that there's just so much of these fantasy stories that Cyril is become really well known in the ANC for giving all these fantasy stories to people of South African. And unfortunately, we still find citizens who actually fall for it, because Cyril just, he has that thing that kind of like attracts people to listening to him. So the truth of the matter is, even if I did watch SONA, I can tell you now, I don't think that the ANC's actions over the past 3 years under Cyril Ramaphosa has proven anything. Life has still gotten worse for South Africans. I think we still had, our standards of living, even though it wasn't too long ago, was still better under Jacob Zuma, surprisingly. Everything seems to be, crumbling down under Cyril. And so, yeah, I did not watch the SONA, and like many other youngsters.
Well, yeah, Tami, I was about to say, it's I think the words you're using, or the descriptor of this weird allure of Cyril Ramaphosa's act, but the content, unfortunately, of this man is questionable. A bit like a Venus flytrap, Russell. The speech had the usual enticing entrapments that you'd expect from, the political elites, but really nothing in it in terms of hard reforms and the very sort of direction that the country needs. Your assessment of the speech before I just put you guys with specifics?
Yeah, look, you know what inspires people? What inspires people is not contrived inspiration. It's truth. People really, really love the truth. They resonate with truth. If a president gets up and says, guys, we're in a bad place, and we're in a bad place largely because of things that me and my party have done, and we're going to start owning these mistakes. And that means X, Y, and Z. And he just cuts all the pomp and ceremony, and he just cuts to the chase. Now, okay, we know why politicians don't do that, and we know that they're covering themselves and all this kind of stuff. But there is something deeply disturbing to the human psyche when a president gets up and just pretends that everything is all right when 60 million people know that it is not. It's just really shameful stuff. It's kind of it's embarrassing. I don't know how you can actually hold your head up. And that's for me how I kind of sum up the state of the nation. Yeah, they can say a bunch of specifics. We can get into a few policy details just now maybe, but the big picture here is it's embarrassing. Get real, man. People want real stuff.
Absolutely. And Chris, I must come to you. Sorry, man, for coming to you last, but I effectively blogged about this, and I made the point Russell is making, which is, for me, it seemed it depressed me to an extent. That here's a man who appears before a nation, who very much knows that his policies and those of his cronies in government have put South Africans through the absolute ringer. Didn't even offer, for instance, an apology. And again, I'm not saying the apology would have been a panacea that fixes everything, but it would have spoken to that realism that Russell is speaking to. The idea that a politician, not accustomed as they are to the truth, but at least in this moment saying, you know what, I feel you, I get it. In fact, he could have looked straight into the camera and said, yes, South African, I feel you, I understand, I feel your pain. We've messed up, but this is how we get ourselves back on the reform track. Your overall assessment, Chris, before I hit you guys with the questions.
Perhaps if the president had said that he and his cabinet would take a 95% pay cut to support social welfare for small businesses after the last 12 months, then that would have been some sort of inspirational speech. I just think it was interesting. A few people who I follow sort of on social media said that he looked tired. And I'm not that surprised that he or the ANC are tired, because they simply have no more radical new ideas. A lot of the ideas are rehashing stuff. It's all big government, all statism, all redistributionism. Everything is state-led. It's all up to the state to improve our lives. So little wonder to me that he looked tired, that he didn't come up with anything really inspirational. There's no radical path forward that I see for the ANC, not in the positive sense, at least. Of course, for them, radicalism is simply more socialism and communism. Sure, something truly radical would be, I don't know, privatizing SAA or Eskom, but of course we wouldn't have had that in the State of the Nation address. But yeah, that's just my quick overview. I'm not surprised that the president is looking quote unquote tired as he is now.
Guys, I'm going to go into some of the meat and potatoes here. And really, there wasn't much in the speech. And he himself, I think, preempting just how empty-handed he was, basically, oh no, I'm not here to make promises, this is suggested. Instead, I'm here to give a report of things, and then proceeds to give the most trashiest report of his time in government. But the five, I've whittled it down to 5 real new pledges in this. But I don't really want us to dwell on the technicalities of the pledge, but rather the ideological underpinnings behind it, because I think that's where the real story of the SONA really lies. So the 5 real pledges that we hear here coming out of the president, 350 Rand grant is extended for 3 months. This is a grant that used to be exclusively dished out during disasters, the social relief of disaster distress, grant, which has now been extended to become a quasi income. What's it called? The very thing that lefties love, a basic income grant, sort of been expanded to become a quasi-basic income grant. Your thoughts on this? I'm going to begin with you, Russell, because I know we've had these sort of conversations before. There's a lot of pressure on this government to start providing a basic income grant as a response to essentially 3 million people losing their jobs. Your thoughts on this continuation of this line of thinking?
Look, I mean, there's so much one could go into here, but there's a lot of people who are welcoming this, people who've been going for universal basic income and basic income grants for a very long time. And of course, COVID and the lockdowns and the great economic crisis that we've been thrust into by the lockdown policies is sort of now opening the door as a real great excuse to provide these kind of grants. But just a few weeks ago, we were told that SASA had no more money for extending grants. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now we want to extend them, and there's talk of rolling it out to all unemployed people. I mean, you can pick your number on this one. How many unemployed people in South Africa? Some people say 6 million, some people say 10 million. It's a big number. Where's that money going to come from? And the big risk, and we don't have to get into all the technical details of this, guys, in tonight's discussion and sidetrack ourselves, but there is a risk that we decide to print the money one day for this kind of funding, and that's how you go down the road of smashing your currency and creating hyperinflations and all sorts of nonsense. Now, we're not doing that yet. The Reserve Bank isn't planning to do that right now. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but when you have these discussions and you're running out of taxes, that's where this kind of tends to go to. So that's a big risk. The other thing, finally, just to say from me, is when you have to do this, when you have more people on grants than are actually employed, and there was a great chart by the Institute of Race Relations, by the Center for Risk Analysis, showing this. There's more people now on grants that are actually employed in this country. That is a great shame. That's not a sign of any kind of success. There should be no gloating about that. That is a complete evidence of deep failure going on. And of course, rather than throwing free money at people, I would far rather they just do the things that create genuine prosperity, which is open this economy up, free it up, get the lockdowns finished, get sensible risk management policies in place, and get things going again. People are absolutely desperate out there, and I think Chris made a great point. These guys are sitting on full salaries. They haven't experienced an ounce of discomfort in lockdown, and there are many households who are fine, and there are many that are just sinking away in despair because they have no income, no prospects, and so to heap on top of that this policy of just throwing free money at people and eventually printing it out of thin air is just an absolute disaster. So there's nothing good I can really say about that. The relief for the most vulnerable, for the people who are genuinely unable to work, unable to help themselves, I'm fine with that kind of relief. But let's just not forget the money comes from somewhere, right? It comes from somewhere and from someone. And when you take it from that other part of the economy to give it to someone else, you need to know that it comes at a cost. It's your foregoing investment, job creation, and all kinds of other benefits from having the money somewhere else. So I just wish that they would acknowledge the cost of all this. And that's the one thing I'll finish up now quickly. That's the one thing that's been lacking, is acknowledging the cost of these incredibly damaging policies like lockdown. You may think you're saving lives in a particular context, and that's very debatable, and we can get it. That's a whole nother can of worms, but it comes at an immense cost. Guys, we have about 1.5 million human beings more unemployed now than a year ago, right? 1.5 million people. That's a sea of people. And that's just hugely devastating.
Absolutely, and there's no way around that. And I must come to you, Sara, for a moment, because there's another myth that was developed in the speech, which continues, unfortunately, the idea that somehow the state magically has the capacity to look after this growing number of poor individuals, that somehow it's even preferable for the state to do this. I mean, there's another conversation or another promise pledge that the president made, the idea that TERS payments would be extended to the 15th of March, especially to those industries that are unable to still operate. But a lot of people who are watching, and really in the comment section, if you're watching the various platforms, are saying, but hang on, the administration of these TERS payments right now by your state has been absolutely shambolic. So I think there's a broader conversation here about this weird insistence by the president that the state can look after people, when the reality is, and people can see the reality, that it really can't. Your thoughts on that? And I'll come to you, Chris, after that. Sara?
Sorry, I've muted myself because there's a bit of thunder in the background. The ANC and the president in particular, talk endlessly about creating a capable state, as if somehow until they become a fully completely fledged, until we become a completely fully fledged socialist society, they cannot become a capable state. Now, my understanding of the word capable is having the ability to do properly or do reasonably well. There is nothing that would have stopped them from being a capable state. The problem is that they're not a capable state, and it all ties into the issues of cadre deployment, BEE. It's that putting people in at the expense of people rather learning from the skilled. And as soon as you have that, you added to your financial woes are your woes of having people who just cannot administer the state sufficiently to do any of this. I mean, to be in a situation where you're turning water cannons onto elderly people collecting grants, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. It's otherworldly.
I mean, it beggars belief. It beggars belief. Chris, I must come to you, Chris, because I know you went ham. You went full ham on social media during the speech, and I want to bring some of your insights into this. But this enduring insistence by the political elites in this country that they can control things, that they have the ability to effectively be a god of sorts, and to control the millions of transactions that happen on a daily basis in this country. The speech underpinned that. There was more of a conversation in the speech around how they'll continue to centralize power. The idea, for example, of the establishment of this committee and that body, for example, a council now of members, which will be called this new anti-corruption body. This idea that the state has this capacity. Can you please, for once and all, burst this myth? Is this government able to do these sort of things?
I don't know if you guys know, but I mean, I learned this from the SONA that the best way to fight against corruption is imposing more centralization. So I guess, why are we worried about these new committees being imposed? I mean, Sikla, you're exactly right. And to link to what Russell was saying earlier on the policy of the lockdowns and what we're talking about, governments presuming that they can sort of decide for people how they interact and manage their own risks. It's what Hayek talked about with the knowledge problem, the presumption that central planners can know intimately the details of our lives, that they can know day to day what I'm going to decide. I mean, some days I don't even know what I'm going to do in the morning. So like for me to plan my day is a mission. Imagine for someone in Pretoria or Bloem or Cape Town wanting to figure out what's going to happen, what's going to work effectively with the pandemic in a township versus a suburb versus the semi-urban area, et cetera, et cetera. So what we saw from President Ramaphosa and what we heard was simply the continuation of not just the last 27 years of government, but even before that. This isn't, we shouldn't make the mistake of presuming it's only this government that has tried to centrally control our lives. It's a running thread throughout South African history. It's just been in different forms and in different iterations. So, yeah, we shouldn't be surprised to hear about new agencies that are going to fight corruption. We've also got a water management agency. I think it was Milton Friedman who said, if you put the government in charge of the Sahara Desert, it'll run out of sand within a year or something like that. So these new agencies, as I mentioned in my introduction, there's nothing radical about them. There's nothing really good that's going to bring about real progress for people's lives, the improvement of quality of life, that kind of thing. It's just devoid of real, I think, imagination and creativity.
Russell, I'm going to come to you and then you, Tami, because this is where I want us to end off here, because really, as I said, I'm not going to go into the meat and potatoes necessarily of each thing that he said, because it's irrelevant, really. But there's a broader tale that the speech told, which is very dangerous. And we've spoken now about this false notion that is perpetuated, that the state can control things. And one of the ways it tries to control businesses, individuals, through the concept of licensing. Licensing is such an insidious and really nefarious means to which, free, what should be a multitude of people in a society making free decisions and cooperating voluntarily, not doing that because of fear of what the state will do with a so-called license to operate. So I use this as a segue because the president then says in the speech, we'll be easing, he says, easing in inverted commas, the licensing requirements for new embedded generation. This is on the issue of Eskom and the country's continuous rolling blackouts. Easing, he says, requirement for new embedded generation projects. These, of course, are small-scale producers and they'll amend, of course, what he calls Schedule 2, not what he calls the law. Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act in 3 months. Russell, I must come to you because licensing is such a broader issue, and he talks the language of easing this license. But the question a lot of people ask, especially entrepreneurs, is why not get rid of it entirely, especially if you're saying you need new entrants in the energy market?
Yeah, we're desperate for energy freedom in this country. We live under a form of energy socialism, energy dirigism, energy cronyism. Call it what you like. We don't have to even get too ideological on this whole thing. Like allow people to produce energy, allow people to produce electricity, allow them to sell it, allow them to buy it. Of course, Eskom is in just this horrendous state as a energy utility, and there are some who argue that it's in a bit of a death spiral, in the sense that if you did privatize, you arguably crash Eskom because demand just floods away to new private sources, and Eskom can't actually generate the revenues that it needs to generate, and it kind of goes into this disaster. It is possible that it's very difficult to avoid a kind of bad energy scenario in this country, that at least for a period of time we might need to hit the wall a little bit and like go through a bit of a crisis period. I mean, I really hope that it doesn't get to the worst case scenario for energy where the lights go off for weeks or God forbid months on end. But if you want to avoid that outcome, you've just got to liberalize the sector dramatically. There are so many innovative ways that energy can be produced and sold and distributed. And this idea that someone has to decide on the energy mix, that some bureaucrat needs to decide on this much coal and this much nuclear and this much green and this and that. Just let people produce energy. In 20 years' time, when we've stabilized everything and GDP per capita is triple what it is today, and everyone's happy and it's a wonderful country, maybe then we can have some discussions, about like the nuances of the better energy sources and all that kind of stuff. We can have these first world sort of discussions. We just desperately need power, and quite frankly, I love fossil fuel energy. It's brought humanity out of poverty. Billions, hundreds of billions of people. Fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, all these things has just brought humanity to an incredible place. And I don't think that we should be trashing it. So there's that whole side of things. Just let the market deliver power. So I agree, and I think, just to finish off this answer, I think you are alluding to a bigger problem, this licensing dirigism, this licensing sort of control, this licensing regime that governments institute. You find it if you go back to old communist countries. I mean, it was licensing. Licensing for licensing. It was non-stop licensing from here until next Wednesday. It was licensing. You had to have a permit for this and a special sign-off for that. And why do these kinds of regimes do this? Because they can funnel you through they can put you through a funnel where there is a node of capture, where someone can capture the value, and that is precisely what these guys are out for. There's a lot of people in the comments tonight that are expressing dismay and a kind of sense of forlornness about things. And what I would say to people about all this is, we can talk about the problems, and we can talk about some of the policy solutions and so on. I do believe people need to start getting angry, and they need to start calling out the kind of nonsense we saw at the SONA. This president mocked, as far as I'm concerned, he mocked 60 million people. It's unconscionable. And it's time for people to really stand up and raise their voices. And when journalists come out writing in praise of the president and what a great president he is, and just how hard his job is and all this kind of stuff, we need to call those journalists out on that as well. And we need to say, guys, get real.
Absolutely.
This is people's lives that these elites are playing with. They're playing a game, and it's not a game for us. It's not a game for the man on the street. So I resonate with some of the comments here. People are pissed off, and they want to see They want to see something real. They want to see a president get real. They want to see proper leadership. And I would just say that at every place that you can effect change, do it forcefully, peacefully, but there's nothing wrong with a bit of righteous anger and really, really putting pressure on these politicians. They need to know that we are not happy and that we're after them.
Absolutely. Fully agreed. Tami, I must come to you just before I move us on to the next topic, really, because I'm just keeping an eye on time. Speaking about time, it is 8:30 on the mark. You're watching Liberty and Friends. If you've just joined me, I'm in conversation with Russell Lamberti. He's from ETM Macro Advisors, a great voice on all things economics, really, and social economic issues. We're also in conversation with Chris Hattingh, the brother from the Free Market Foundation. Shout out to him. He's on the stream with us. Sara, who is from the Daily Friend publication. You can find that at www.dailyfriend.co.za. And of course, last but not least, Tami Jackson, who is the co-founder of the liberal student movement Progress SA. Really, I call it a student movement. It isn't. It is a liberal movement called Progress SA. And I was just going to Tami now, because Tami, maybe just to cap off this issue of the SONA, perhaps, without giving your age away here, but you're the youngest of us here, and you're someone who still has a relationship with the university world, and students. I don't know what your experience has been. Maybe you've spoken to other students, or maybe you guys chat. Your thoughts as a student body. Is there a sense of, after hearing the speech, I, as a student, walking out into the world of work, will more likely find work now? Did that SONA speak that kind of language of inspiring young people to think there is a future for them? Tami? Okay, I may have lost Tami there for a moment. We have a slight glitch, but that's quite fine. We're going to move on. Tami, I think we lost you there for a second, but we're going to move on nonetheless, because I must look at this issue of the brain drain. There was an article I read over the week, which was rather interesting. The headline, the big headline is, skilled people in their 30s and 40s are leaving South Africa. And it begins to make the argument, or doesn't begin, it continues to demonstrate just how much of a problem this is in the economy. Without even getting to the article, I must begin with you guys. Sara, this is a topic we've spoken about, for instance. You have parents in this country who are saying goodbye to children and whole sections of their family as people seek opportunity elsewhere, escaping some of the push factors. What are some of these push factors that is pushing, especially young professionals, out of the country?
Well, gosh, where does one start? The factors obviously are generally young professionals do not see a future for themselves in the broad sense, because the people leaving, there's often a misconception that they're only white people leaving the country, and it's not true. People across the color spectrum are leaving the country. They see the country as having virtually absolutely no future for them or their children, and they're young enough to make a go of it somewhere else. And that, of course, is really bad for South Africa, because we need that age cohort to fill a gap between youngsters without experience, school, university, training, college, etc., and the older who are heading towards retirement. And if those people go, we're in trouble. And by all accounts, the number has picked up so hugely. It's just that sense of everything is going wrong. The government is responsible for almost everything. No electricity, no jobs. In fact, worse than no jobs, etc., etc. And of course, you have all the factors of crime and raising and the prices going up, which even someone like me has noticed, and I'm not very good at these things. So there's just such an all-round sense of insecurity that you're having people leaving. And I did a little sort of, we call it a survey, but I probably call it a snap poll towards the end of last week, asked 10 questions. And one of them was, if you could, would you leave South Africa? And more than 50%, 52, 53% of people said yes, they would if they could. And that is a sign of there are no illusions anymore. No one is impressed by as we discussed earlier, the sort of the honeyed tones and the soft talk. people, and that's what's probably so terrible about the way the politicians treat us, is we know what we're experiencing. They mustn't tell us what they think we are experiencing. And the problem is there's such a disconnect between how they're behaving and essentially the lies they're telling us, and what people are reading. And the way they do it is they're leaving the country, and you've got people who are very marketable, should be marketable here and elsewhere, but are more marketable elsewhere now than here. And that's an enormous tragedy for the country.
Sita, could I jump in? Could I jump in very quickly, just to latch onto that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I think it connects a bit with what we saw in the SONA. We have this. I think it's not just. It's moved beyond the government is got bad policy. We've moved beyond the government is maybe incompetent in a number of areas. People believe, and I think with very good justification, that this government is malicious. This government is actually out to get you. This is a cabal of people that are running a fiefdom, and in a way it becomes, once you start getting that, obviously and we know that there's a tremendous corruption going on there, but it's not like that's sort of a bug. That's a feature. That's a feature of this party that's running the country. And when you see the president get up so calmly and pretend like everything is fine, you almost wonder to yourself, maybe they actually know it is fine for them, right? They're in control. There's no real political competition, right? I understand there's factions and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on, but these guys, I think that's what demoralizes people. This government, bad policy is one thing. You can lobby, you can fight, you can kind of get it overturned. You can appeal to reason. You can appeal to someone's reason and you can get that stuff overturned. But when there's malice, when there's a perception of malicious intent, these guys are a predatory state. That I think is what gets people down, and to move that into the immigration story. I think that's what drives people away. Crime is bad. It's terrible, and that is a reason for certain people. There's a bunch of reasons, economic, all this kind of stuff. But I would say that the kicker, the tip factor that pushes someone away is this realization that actually this state does not care about me one iota. They just don't, and they will rip me off as long as they can, and that demoralizes people. Now, like to get on the front foot on that and to be positive, this is precisely why we have to fight this government with an anger and with a smart and with a strategic kind of intent that's way beyond politics as usual. We can have discussions another day about what that looks like, and that's going to take some really, really clear thinking. But we've got to get very, very serious about what's going on. This government is going to destroy this country, and they're going to be smiling while they do it, and that's what's really concerning.
Chris, I'm going to bring you on here because I think Russell makes a critical point. But I want to add something to this, which is it's ideology also that's driving this particular vindictiveness, if you will, and really a nonchalant, not even caring when you destroy an economic base and a foundation such as a growing middle class. The idea that you want a growing middle class. I'm going to cite some data here from the National Income Dynamics Survey, the NID survey, and looking at the income bands defined as middle class and above. The survey shows that between the year 2017 and 2020, in June last year, this segment of the adult population has declined from, brace yourself, 6.1 million to about 2.7 million individuals, translating to a 55.7% drop in what is termed the middle class. It has been the absolute destruction of the middle class. And again, I must say I agree with Russell, but your thoughts on some of the drivers that push people out and just that destruction of the middle class and the ideology behind it?
Look, I think the ideology point is crucial. The sort of ideology or philosophical worldview that you have determines what policies you're going to advocate for, whether you think the state should be central to people's lives or whether you think, for example, the private sector is the best way, leaving it free to uplift people's quality of life kind of thing. So I think very much policies are downstream from ideas, and you should always look at what ideology informs what the decisions the current government is taking, which is why I think someone such as Anthea Jeffrey's work is so crucial to understanding the background of the ANC and the government and where they come from, from their context, and not to give them credit, but they're consistent with their ideology. To me, destruction, poverty, hunger, those are not bugs, to paraphrase Russell. Those are necessary features of socialism and communism. So the ANC is being consistent in implementing its ideology. We shouldn't say it's irrational. The consequences follow from the ideology that you adopt, So to just link this to the brain drain point phenomenon, we've got two policies coming up in the next maybe year, probably, I think within the next year or two, expropriation without compensation and the national health insurance. So those two things, fundamentally increase the power of the state even more. They increase the control of the state to do things such as redistribution. With healthcare, that'll monopolize the management of all healthcare services and goods in the hands of the state. So can there be any surprise that young, skilled people are leaving? Why would they want to sort of open up what they build and what they create to that sort of state control? It makes no sense that you would want to invest in a country where any future government can arbitrarily seize your property. Not just to focus on the ANC, any future government, if we amend Section 25 of the Constitution, can have this sort of power. And we should keep that in mind. I mean, the president talked about smart cities, capital formation and investment. You're not going to have any of that kind of stuff if you dilute property rights. I mean, if property rights aren't absolute and secure, you're not going to have real investment and real formation. And the government, at some point, I think, is going to run into the wall of, it assumes it can redistribute people into prosperity. It assumes it can have this massive social grant system. It can have the 350 Rand grant. It can have the TERS system, but you can't redistribute people into economic prosperity. The only way you can do that is by removing, a lot of the bureaucratic red tape and other ideological driven policies that we have in South Africa.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm just keeping on time. We are in the last 15 minutes of the show. Welcome to it. If you're just joining us, this is Liberty and Friends. Every Saturday, 8 p.m., we wrap up the news week. You've just joined us at the right time, where I open up the discussion to my panelists for issues that maybe they care about, that they may have written about this week in an open mic session. It's an open mic to even you, dear viewers. So if you have something you want to maybe ask the panelists, please drop that question in the comment section and I'll share it on screen, and we'll, in the last 15 minutes or so, chew on it too. Guys, remember, please share the show and smash that like button. Fellas, I must raise this issue, maybe just to sum up this section, and we just have Tami join us again. We had a technical glitch, but welcome back, Tami. But Tami, you're in that age group that this report cites is doing most of the leaving, really. People in the sort of 30s and 40s, you're in that sort of 20s age group, you're heading to it, if you will, of skilled individuals who are looking to emigrate. Amongst your peers, what have you seen? Maybe even give us your personal experience. Do you have a future in this country? Do you feel like you have a future in this country?
To be quite honest with you, Sihle, for now, many of my friends are still in South Africa because a lot of them don't really have a lot of technical fields of study. And I think that a lot of the people who are leaving South Africa are the ones perhaps in the fields of science, development, civil engineering, all of those sectors which I think at this point in the country is really suffocating under the ANC. And so there are two things I want to mention, but first about myself. No, I don't intend on leaving South Africa anytime soon. I do intend on staying around for a while, and if you follow me on social media, you'll see why. So I think that there are two things. If more South African students had the opportunity, or if government, for example, invested in students who actually study anything in the field of science, or technology or anything like that, I don't think that they would stay anyway. What you see in South Africa is that a lot of our students in the humanities faculty, like they graduate, but even they can't afford to actually leave the country. And I think that NSFAS has kind of invested more in fields of study that don't require, maths, economics, or science or anything like that. And I think that's also a problem. So I do think that, yes, I have seen a lot of university students talking about the possibility of leaving. But at the same time, I think it also turns to like a very emotional conversation. I don't really think that, we're talking about necessarily, retaining more people in the country. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And again, no, it absolutely does. And I'm keeping an eye on time, guys. Here, I don't know if anybody maybe has written something this week that they want to raise. Chris, I'm sort of angling towards you because I know you're quite prolific, and you, Sara, given the Daily Friend. Sara, let me begin with you. Is there anything maybe you've written this week that you feel we need to share on the show? Now, after your input, there are a few questions I want to get to. There's a question about Western Cape independence. Russell, I'm going to look to you on that one to get your view on it. But Sara, any interesting tidbits from the Daily Friend we need to know?
Something we raised, I wrote a news item, but I think on the ideology issue, it's fascinating. Even Cuba has decided that it cannot stick with a purely socialist model to get it out of the financial drag. Selling redundant medicines to our army and renting out their doctors across the world isn't enough. So, of course, typical sort of interventionist government, what they've done is they've created a list of, I don't know, about 2,000 job types that people can follow, or businesses that people can follow, and they don't have to continue only employing family. Now, isn't that an answer in itself to our government? I mean, the tragedy is it doesn't help to point out the successful countries, which all have the same theme of a greater or lesser extent of respect for the individuals and allowing people to determine how they live their lives and what businesses they run. It's the ideology. It's almost beyond the blindness of the ideology, which is 50, 60 years back already. It is that I think it's in the fact that it is a captured state. That is their business that is the business of the state. It is looking after the state. But fascinating because Cuba has always been a sort of first port of call for the admired state. It was the country that came to the aid in Angola, etc. And even Cuba's pulling apart. So now you're left with the ANC sort of looking at Venezuela, North Korea, and it gets worse and worse. And I don't know. I mean, I think one of the most extraordinary tweets that Tito Mboweni came out with late last year was an almost desperate plea that he could not explain to his colleagues how free markets work. They just couldn't take it on board. And
Sure.
Look, if there's any sort of hope on the horizon, we fairly firmly believe that 2024 will see the ANC go below 50%, if it doesn't split in the meantime, which would hasten all sorts of other things. But it's that even the world around the ANC that it's always been able to rely on is shifting, and that's not talking about what we're doing and what we as a country are doing as people who deserve more respect than we're shown.
Absolutely. Russell, let me go to you. I don't know if there's anything else you've been thinking about, but there was a question here about this notion of Western Cape independence. I mean, we've been talking a lot about people emigrating, but there's been a growing chorus of people saying, hey, why emigrate when you can just have a section of the country break off and form its own country, i.e. the Western Cape? Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is something I support generally as an idea. It's very polarizing, and a lot of South Africans hate it because they love South Africa. They love, their country, and they don't want to see it broken up. Polls have shown that the the idea has pretty substantial support within the Western Cape. Probably about a third, 1 in 3 people in the Cape would vote for independence. Considering that this is really a totally fringe issue that is only recently in the last, maybe 24 months become something. I mean, it's been around for longer than that, but it's only really come into the consciousness of people, and even then, not that many people. So I think there's significant support for it, but without getting into a whole debate on the viability of it and the realpolitik of actually getting that done and how the ANC would oppose it, because it's fraught with all kinds of things that we could spend hours on. What's the basic principle here for me? The basic principle is people are desperate for decentralized government. They're desperate to hold local politicians accountable that are from their communities, that they can relate to, that they can hold accountable. We are absolutely desperate in South Africa for political decentralization. And by the way, this problem long precedes the ANC. We had an apartheid state that was very centrally planned. The British kind of imperial control, if you like, the 1910 settlement, which was kind of a British dominated settlement, was very centrally planned. The cobbling together of South Africa in 1910 was not how South Africa had been used to being for the previous few hundred years. Now, be that as it may, that we have this political entity now, but come on, let's just admit that when the British ran it, when the Afrikaner nationalists ran it, and when the ANCs run it, running things from Pretoria for 60 million very different people, and let's just be honest about that. We're a nation of at least 7, 8, 9, 10 different nations, right? Different languages, different cultures, different heritages, different religions, different ways of seeing the world. And I think that's beautiful. And we need a politics that can accommodate those differences. So whether you want to talk secession, whether you want to maybe be more moderate and talk deep federalism, we need a situation where more of our tax money stays closer to home, where we can hold local politicians to account, and where local politics can develop its own flavor. And that's real diversity as far as I'm concerned. I mean, people throw this diversity word around all the time. That to me is real diversity, when you start having decentralized politics and you start having different regions of the country being able to govern themselves in slightly different ways with slightly different rules according to their customs and their traditions. That's the preservation of diversity. What we have now is a central monoculture, monopolitical culture run by a communist organization, a communist government, basically a socialist government, trying to impose a one-size-fits-all strategy on 60 million different people. Come on, guys, that's nuts. Right, that's radical and crazy.
Which they actually call democratic centralism. It's part of their ethos and doctrine, which frightens me. Guys, I must say we've effectively run out of time, the last 4 minutes. So I'm just going to give Chris and Tami and Sara the last word. Actually, Russ, I'll also give you last word. But guys, please keep it brief, 30 seconds. And with that being said, Chris, I come to you, dude. Anything that you've thought about this week? Something maybe you want the listeners to keep an eye on? And also, how do we reach you in terms of your social media, brother?
Well, working at the FMF, there's 20 pies that we try and have our fingers in all the time. So we're thinking about all sorts of things every day. But I just want to highlight the deadline for comments on the expropriation bill is the 28th of February. So we encourage everyone to get their opposition and their comments in on that. Please make sure that you voice your opposition to the expropriation bill before the 28th of February. And then just something I wanted to highlight on sort of hopefully a positive note, some research and work that I'm going to be doing in coming weeks and months is just on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Very radical to hear that Africa has, any chance of a free trade area, but we have this agreement sort of in place now. We'll see if governments actually follow the recommendations and the policies thereof of removing barriers to trade. So that sort of thing is exactly what Africa needs for increased prosperity, and we'll see if that actually gets implemented. And I'm going to make that a big focus of my work going forward. If you want to follow the Free Market Foundation, you can find all our work on www.freemarketfoundation.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at ChrisHat11. Thanks very much.
Awesome, brother. Thank you. And absolutely, I'll definitely have you back on for that conversation on the Africa Free Trade Agreement, because I think it potentially opens up a lot of doors. Tami, I'm going to come to you just very briefly, please, in 30 seconds. How do the people reach you? And if you're writing something, what can we expect coming out from you?
So what I would like to
we have once again lost. Oh, there we go.
So what I would like
Yes,
to
Tami.
leave with you, what I would like to leave with your viewers, Sihle, especially because you asked the question on Western Cape independence, is I'd like to ask people, would you like yourself to be independent of South Africa, or would you like yourself to be independent of the ANC? I think that's the real question that we have to deal with. And if you look at the amount of people that actually voted in the last elections, the ANC got just over 10 million votes, while 18 million people, or probably more, abstained from voting. So there's a really simple solution called the ballot paper, and I'd like for people to start thinking about how you can actually start convincing the silent majority and that silent 18 million people. You know, how do you convince them to actually start voting? Because getting rid of the ANC, it's actually, as you know, it's not that difficult if we actually choose to step out of our homes and away from our computer screens and actually engage people face to face. So ask yourself, to the Western Cape independent advocates, do you want to be independent of South Africa, or do you want to be independent of the ANC? And then you can follow me on Facebook.
Right.
I'm more active there. Twitter, not so much, but I try to be. But yeah, like it's always a fail.
Hey man, them Twitter streets is jungle. Thank you very much, Tami. I will have your details on the descriptor. Sara, I'm going to give you a last word, something you might be writing about, which we need to look out for, and of course, how do we reach you? And of course, Russell will end with you.
Well, I'm actually got a number of things sort of burning in the way of articles at the moment. I've just written about big pharma in South Africa from perhaps an angle people might not expect. But I'd really like to echo what Tami said. The idea of the Cape independence movement I don't believe would have existed if the country were governed reasonably properly. It is about governance. I know people are very, very depressed at the moment. My advice is that vote is the few occasions when absolutely everyone is equal. The numbers make the difference, and the ANC can be voted out as a result. Otherwise, if there are petitions to be signed, if there are movements to be supported, do that, because very often just expressing your anger and translating into some form of action means things can happen around you. It's not sinking into that mire of complete despair, which is very easy to do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sara. And Sara, how do we reach you? Daily Friend?
Sorry.
Okay.
Daily Friend is www.dailyfriend.co.za and at the irr.org.za.
Thank you very much. And Russell, of course, final word, brother.
Final word.
Thoughts,
Thanks,
your thoughts of the week and how we reach you?
Very gracious of you to give me the final word. I'm on Twitter at Russ Lamberti. Yeah, look, I'm passionate about decentralized governance. Really passionate about it, especially for South Africa. You know, we have a beautiful country with many diverse peoples, and we're trying to shove them into a one size fits all policy, and I just don't think that works. And I think we need to be thinking much more innovatively about how to make South Africa work. Okay, and a simple centrally run democracy in and of itself, I don't think is sufficient. Run by a kleptomaniac socialist government is absolutely a disaster. So I'm very passionate about that. And it links to the other thing that I'm passionate about at the moment, which is decentralized solutions for dealing with complex problems like a virus. We've put a one-size-fits-all solution called lockdown, whether you live in Khayelitsha or Gugulethu, or you live on the Atlantic seaboard, or you live in Sandton, or you live in rural KZN. We said same policy for 60 million people. And I don't think that works in any way, shape, or form. I think it's tyrannical. I think it's deeply authoritarian. We need to be giving agency back to individuals, to families, to church communities, to local communities, to manage their risks. And really, those two themes, decentralized governance and anti-lockdown, you can go check out Business for Ending Lockdown, which is a group that we started with a number of business organizations. But those two ideas are actually basically the same kind of ideas. They're the anti-empire idea. They're the anti-centralization idea, the anti-authoritarian idea. And I think South Africa's got to catch this. We've got to catch this bug of wanting to be able to decentralize control and power back to people, back to communities. And I know you're passionate about that, Sihle. So thanks for having us, and thanks everyone. It's been a great chat. Thanks for all the great comments as well. Cheers, guys.
Guys, and I must say thank you to every single one of you as a panel. With that being said, let me just say goodbye to everybody. And sorry, guys, give me a second here as I struggle with my tech. But yeah, thank you to my guest. That was, of course, Russell Lamberti, Chris Hattingh, Sara and Tami Jackson. And thank you, dear viewer, for having been a part of the show. You know, Liberty and Friends, again, comes to you every Sunday at 8 p.m. And it's going to be an hour show. If it's very interesting, we'll add maybe a 15 minutes. But I really appreciate you guys for watching. Please, please, please hit the like button and share the link. Have as many of your friends watch the show. And that is the best contribution you can make to the Big Daddy Liberty Show, any of my shows, whether it's the vlogs, the actual Big Daddy Liberty Show itself that comes to you on a Wednesday at 7, or this show, Liberty and Friends, which rounds up the week. So thank you very much. You've been watching Liberty and Friends. My name is Sihle Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty. And please support the show. All the information is in the descriptor of this video. With that being said, and as I always remind you, never trust a commie.